What's good, everybody, and welcome back to the channel for another episode of our Oakland Athletics franchise here on MLB The Show 23. We are now into June, and I was looking at June trying to figure out what I wanted to do for this next episode, and there wasn't a particular series or storyline that really interested me to what I wanted to base an episode around, but one thing that is upcoming is the MLB draft. And so preparation for that is probably our main focus at this point in the season, really now at the middle point of the season here in June. And I've got to be honest, in the scouting that I've done in this draft, it does not look nearly as good as last. I don't think we're going to end up with our first 4 picks all having a potential from our last draft, which was absolutely insane. Don't see that being the case with this draft. So I wanted to get a better idea of, in this draft, maybe not taking just these studs because they might not be available, but filling in some holes in the roster. But with 90-man roster, sometimes it's hard to know what those holes are. And so I wanted to use this episode to kind of make a state of the roster. Where does everyone sit? I've grouped everyone into 4 different buckets on the roster, and we're going to talk about them today. There will be no gameplay in this episode, so if that's what you tuned in for, you're going to have to come back post-draft for that. But this episode, going to be going by player, grouping them into the buckets, and then using that to figure out what our top needs are on the team. And then we will do a final prospect draft preview before the draft, which will be next episode. So what I've done is I've grouped everyone into 1 of 4 buckets. Like I said, the first is core, and core is pretty self-explanatory. Big piece of the future, building around this player. Probably young, not going to be, regressing at any point soon. This includes players that are on the MLB roster that we're building around, as well as prospects currently in the minors, but I am very confident that they will be impact players for us once they are ready to make their call up to the MLB. The second is complementary, where these guys are more just, I guess, it's self-explanatory, complementary to the core guys. They're on the roster. I could see them being here long-term, but I'm not sad if, they end up getting used in a trade, or if their contract is too expensive and you don't bring them back. They're more just possible long-term pieces, but not necessarily building blocks. The third is boom or bust. That is kind of going to be where we put all of the prospects, where I'm hopeful that they'll make impacts on the team eventually when they, get ready to move up to the show. But I'm not necessarily counting on it. I'm not afraid to double up at that position, get somebody else that could maybe be more of a sure thing. And then the last bucket, which we won't actually be talking about because it's kind of just like a stopgap bucket, where he's an older veteran who's probably just going to be on this team for a year. We're going to look to replace him next year, or a career minor leaguer. And those guys just probably aren't worth really diving too deep into. So let's get into going by position group, where this roster stands, starting with starting pitcher, where I have 3 players in the core bucket here. Trevor Rogers, of course, was the big trade deadline acquisition in year 1. Miami just had so many good pitchers. They had just drafted another one, and they decided to turn a really good pitching prospect into some position players. We made that deal. He has been our ace ever since. Hasn't really played like it. Has had ERAs in the 4s throughout this series until this year, where he has been able to bring that down. Hopefully he can continue to play this way, as he still has 3 years after this one on his contract. Second player in this bucket is Jack Flaherty, who will be with us this year and next, but I've been impressed with Jack Flaherty, and I would like to keep him beyond that, if possible, once he becomes a free agent. I just feel like, yeah, Trevor Rogers may be our ace for the moment, but I do feel like Jack Flaherty has been our best pitcher so far in year 2 and in year 3 as well. And then only one of our pitching prospects makes into the core bucket of guys I truly am banking on being impact starters at some point in their career, and that's Bo Schnell. I've been impressed with Bo Schnell when we've gone in and played with him. It's been a while since we've done that. I'd like to get another Bo Schnell game in before the end of this year, but I just am impressed at the rate in which he is growing as well. His overall is rising very fast. His per nines are rising very fast. Control isn't the best for him, but I do think he'll be making his MLB debut sooner rather than later, despite being a little bit worse this year, numbers-wise, than he was last. For complimentary starting pitchers, I only have one, and that is German Marquez, somebody that we signed in free agency last year to a 3-year deal worth $4.3 per year. I think German Marquez is just, an MLB level pitcher. You're gonna throw him out there and he's gonna do fine. He's not gonna be some great pitcher. He's probably not gonna be terrible either. Just dependable, and that's the kind of player that is in that complimentary bucket. Would I hesitate to throw German Marquez in a trade to upgrade a pitcher? Absolutely not. But I'm absolutely fine throwing out there in that 4 or 5 slot. This year he's in the 3. I think he fits more future-wise in that 4 or 5 slot. And then boom or bust for starting pitcher is quite a large group. We have 8 guys here. And I tried to, at least with this, I don't know if I did this for every category, but with starting pitchers, the guys at the top of the list, I am more confident in. And then as you go down, I'm less and less hopeful in them being the boom rather than the bust. Let's start with Omar Cannon. Of course, we've talked about him. We just saw him earlier a couple of episodes ago. He pitched into the 8th inning of his start. He's been doing well, a really good lefty pitcher. He's like really borderline, almost made it into the core. I'm fairly confident Omar Cannon will end up being an impact level pitcher, but there's still a chance he just never quite makes it. He's still into the 6th season. Pitchers, develop very, what's the word I'm searching? It's not consistent at all. Gunnar Hoagland was one of the year 1 players that we got, one of the few good prospects from the team. He has been developing a little bit slower than I would like, but I also feel like he's close to being able to make his call up to the bigs. Another guy that I would like to see again, I don't think we've seen him in quite some time, Santiago Rodriguez. We have seen incredibly high ceiling player, but right now nowhere close to ready. I think he just got to 60 overall, or maybe he's not quite there. I can't remember, but a player who invested in long term, but maybe he's so far away that he could be better used as a trade asset, because that high A potential is going to be very intriguing to some teams who are looking to sell now and build for the future. Luis Medina, just saw him play recently as well. I think he's solid in terms of our prospects, got the best velocity on the team. Him, I think, along with the guy we'll talk about next. But I could definitely see him being a starter at some point, especially if we need to save money at pitcher, because we're paying some really sick position players that we have drafted quite a few that do have good ceilings. Next up on the list is JT Ginn, and yes, he only has C potential, but he's been really good in the first 2 years of this franchise. Not doing super great in terms of his ERA this year being in the 5s. I've given him a little bit of a long reach because earlier in the year, he had a pretty good whip despite the high ERA. Now it's just kind of looking like 5 ERA is where he's going to be at this year. Could easily see him becoming a long reliever, but I don't know if I feel like he needs to be demoted, because I feel like he's He's not doing terrible. He's just not doing too well. Ken Waldachuk is a lefty who was also on the base roster for us. He's been playing pretty well in long relief for us this year. He was in our starting rotation year one. It was not going well. And the same could be said of Kyle Muller, who just has not been developing well for us. I am not very confident in his ability to ever become a starting level pitcher in the MLB. He is on the very short list of guys that I would love to throw into a trade. Trade deadline, off season, whatever it is, to try and find a spot where we can get better. And then Hans Kraus, part of the Paul Blackburn deal back in year one. Haven't really seen much of him, but he's been fine. I just don't know if he's ever going to develop the ratings where you feel confident he could play in the MLB. Let's now move towards the bullpen, where I have two core players who are both prospects currently. Nobody on the MLB roster. There's somebody that I nearly put because of the year he's having this year, but felt more adequate to be in the boomer bust category. But Gilberto Vasquez, just drafted him. Already like 70 overall with an A potential in his teenage years. We've seen him play. I think he's got good stuff. He's got a good pitch mix. I'm very confident that he could be the closer of the future for this organization. And then Carlos Liriano was somebody who got drafted by somebody else last year, didn't get signed, ended up in the free agent pool. We scooped him up. Has B potential at, I think it's the low B from what I remember scouting his profile. But he was kind of one of those, maybe higher floor, but lower ceiling kind of guys. And I'm just confident, even though he doesn't have, the best pitch mix, that he'll be in the bullpen for the long run just because he already is a decent level. Now let's talk about boomer bust. Didn't have any complimentary guys in the bullpen. I kind of feel like either have great bullpen players or people who are going to be boomer busts. And this, once again, a very big group. Zach Jackson was the guy I almost put in core because he is smoking hot this season. He has been excellent. He was terrible in year one. Improved a lot in year two, but still wanted more. He has been better than I could ever have expected this year. Probably a leading candidate for the Surprise of the Year award for this year for the MLB roster. He's been excellent. It says Oviedo, but Oviedo is Rule 5 pickup. This one's not in order of most confident to least confident as much as starting pitchers was, but he's also been really good this year. And so still just 25 years old. I think he has a good shot of being a long-term piece for us. Brett Martin, he was a Rule 5 pickup for us last year, was really good for us last year, has not been nearly as good this year, hence boomer bust. Kenny Martin was a draft pick for us, has high C potential, but he's just 57 overall right now. If he ends up making it in the MLB, sweet. If not, I'm not really counting on it. Garrett Dennis was the player that we picked over Omar Cannon. I think I've discussed ad nauseum the mistake that was, but still think he can be a long-term piece for the bullpen. Zach Little, Rule 5 pickup this year. Still has some time under his belt to improve and become a long-term piece for us. Johnny Huerta, a reliever from our year one draft, developing quite nicely. Still has some ratings that need some work before he gets to be an MLB level pitcher, but there you have it. And then Eric Ullman has potential to be a long reliever, long-term for this squad. Just want to see some continued development from him. That's a lot of pitchers that we've gone through, and now let's get to the offensive side of the ball here with the position players, I guess defense too, but just let's switch over to position players is what I'm trying to say. Starting with core catchers, and I think we do have two of those. Tyler Soderstrom, who got the call up to MLB this year, wasn't playing particularly well. Asked him to go back down to AAA, and he's been playing much better there. Still think he's very close to that MLB call up. Could maybe even see a call up this year once again, whether that be September call-ups or earlier than that. And then Alex Angeles, I do believe, is the best hitting prospect in the minors that we have right now. I'd say overall hitting prospect would be Boyce McDermott. He's not even a prospect anymore. He's already gotten a lot of MLB service time. So Alex Angeles, very, very excited about his future as a hitter. In terms of actually being a catcher, though, I don't know if he's ever going to make it. I'm honestly counting on him being a DH. And then if he develops really well at catcher, then maybe he can be a backup catcher for us. Don't have any complimentary catchers. I guess you could put Jake Rogers in there, but I kind of view him more stopgap. Shea Langeliers, he's actually hitting quite well this year in a limited role. I've just expanded his role to be hitting against right and lefties. So hopefully, with the bigger sample size, we could see if this breakout season from him is legitimate or not. And then Franz Garrison, somebody that we drafted last year, couldn't sign, went out and signed him in the off season of that year. In terms of defensive catcher, he's probably our best. That's one thing that I do feel like we're lacking. Again, the point of this exercise is to see where this team is lacking. I think a defensive catcher is something that we do not have on this roster, one that I like long term. Franz Garrison is probably our best option there, but he is nowhere close to being a threat at the plate. Now let's switch gears to the second to last position group that we will go through, and that is the infield, where I think we have three core players. First up, Bobby Witt Jr. He was the year 2 trade deadline acquisition, a massive pickup for us. We traded the best prospect at the time in our organization, the number 2 prospect in all of baseball, who, fun fact, Geraldo Soto is actually the number 1 prospect in baseball now, because Boyce McDermott and Frank Cannon have both served enough MLB service time that they are no longer considered prospects. So traded the number 1 prospect in all of baseball for Bobby Witt. And so, signed him to a 6-year, $66 million contract. He's with us for the long haul. Gleyber Torres, he signed a 2+1 for us last season, and he has been really good. I think he has cooled down a little bit. He started, it was weird. The first couple weeks of the year, he wasn't good at all, but then he went on fire. After that, started to cool down a little bit, but still like Gleyber Torres and what he offers the team for the next at least 2 years. He has a player option after that. I guess we'll have to see how he performs in the next 2 years to see if he will accept. Ian Happ is a player that has a player option for next year, and I do not think he will pick it up, but somebody I absolutely want to re-sign. He has been everything that I wanted him to be. Recently switched Bobby Witt and Ian Happ in terms of the order. I want to give that a little bit more time to see if those guys can truly excel in those roles. Ian Happ, I think, has potential to be a really good leadoff hitter for us. Switch hitter, position versatility. Put him in the infield because that's what he's playing this year. I could easily see him being a core outfielder as well, just because he could play anywhere in the outfield. Really like having a switch hitter that's that versatile and can play some defense. I love Ian Happ. Complementary infield players. I have a couple, and these are prospects that I'm confident can be MLB players at one point, but I don't think they're going to be incredible MLB players, and that's Robert Poisson, who I think can eventually be a starting second baseman. Can he take over for Gleyber Torres at some point in the future, be a much cheaper option? Absolutely, I think that's a possibility. Probably, maybe a season 5 thing when Gleyber Torres, if he, rejects his player option. Rene Hernandez, really good contact hitter, doesn't offer much else, which is why I think he's more of maybe he can start at third base for us, but maybe more of a backup player or a backup DH, because his hitting stats are in a good spot. And then one boomer bust infield prospect in Zach Geloff. One of the better prospects from the day 1, episode 1 roster, but I just haven't really been impressed with him. He was on the short list for disappointment of the year last year. Didn't end up winning it, and that's only because Last year I did 1 overall. I think this year we'll be doing an MLB disappointment and a minor league disappointment, as well as surprise as well. So probably would have won our minor league disappointment of the year and had -3 potential last year. But he's been better this year. I think he's like an excellent candidate to be a trade piece because I think he actually can be good. Maybe just needs to change the scenery to boost him up a little bit. And now for the last position group, we will be talking about outfield players. Our lone core outfielder is Boyce McDermott, of course, generational prospect who has come in to the MLB at age 18. I know not the most realistic thing, but I had conditions on him making the team, and he met them. He was our best player or second best player in spring training. I'm not just going to demote the guy for the sake of realism when realistically, based on his stats, that guy's making the opening day roster. So anyway, at age 18, he's proved that, yes, he should have been on the opening day roster all along. Going right to the MLB is not hurting his development at all. He's been awesome. Complimentary, I do feel like we are loaded up on a bit of complimentary outfielders. I think Lawrence Butler won Surprise Player of the Year last year, more of like a 2-year award for him because year 1 was really good and I feel like he needed to be rewarded for it. But he continues to regress year after year, and he was the guy that, you know, after 2 years, I thought for sure maybe you could have even put in the core part of the. I should say he was closer to core than he was boom or bust. But now things are looking more and more like he could end up in that boom or bust category, or maybe even a stopgap starter. Frontal Reyes. He's been doing what I asked. You know, he's been supplying power for the team, leads the team in home runs right now, and exactly what I wanted out of a DH. Right, his fielding is nothing spectacular, but I think he can start there in case of injury or just somebody needs a rest. And then, you know, strikes out a lot. His average isn't great, but he does supply power better than anyone has been on the team. And then Ramon Laureano ends up making complimentary. To start this year, I definitely would have put him in stopgap starter, but he's actually second on the team in home runs, and he's having a bit of a breakout year in this contract year to the point where I am not opposed to bringing him back. I'll wait till the offseason to see kind of what he's asking for, but if it's reasonable, yeah. And he continues the season that he's having. Not sad about bringing him at all. And then boom or bust, the last player we'll talk about here before we switch gears to the draft is Eduardo Silva, who was the first draft pick in this franchise. I think maybe a little bit of lack of knowledge from me about how important vision and discipline are caused that to be the number 1 pick. I mean, he wasn't the player I wanted the most. Let's make that clear. But he was certainly on my short list. And it's not like he's been terrible or anything. It's just he's been developing a little bit slower than I would have liked, keeping him from the core category. And honestly, I think the thing that's hurting him the most, putting him from core into boom or bust, is the fact that he might be best suited as a DH. And I like Alex Angeles more long-term in that role. And so really need him to be a better fielder. And then I could see him easily slipping into that core category. And then maybe just being a little bit more consistent as a hitter as well. So that was a lot of time that we spent talking about the guys who are already on the team. Let's switch gears and now talk about guys who I think would be good draft picks. Let's go ahead and take a look at our Athletics draft board. Now, much more fleshed out from what I showed you at the end of last episode, as we are now at the end of June. And I have done all of the scouting except for just this one last session. And let's talk about the players that are very high kind of on my short list for the draft, which will be next episode. I think at the top of the draft, there's very clearly two prospects to choose from. First is William Ma, who is ranked as the #1 player on the MLB board. He is a good hitting prospect for sure, particularly against lefties. That contact versus lefties looks great. Plate skills look to be in a very good spot as well. In terms of fielding and reaction look to be good. Like 60s, 70s, those are good spots to start, but his arm is atrocious. Probably that's a left field only arm, and right now that's where we have Boyce McDermott, and I'm not sitting Boyce McDermott from what we've seen from him. And so the fact that the arm is so bad and and he's a righty bat, when I do feel like we need a lefty, is what's gonna maybe is kind of my only hesitancy with him, is what I'm trying to say. And that brings up number 2, which is Daryl Kohler. I forgot to mention, as you can see there on the kind of the bottom right of the draft board, should you go into it, from kind of this team inventory I took, I found top needs. And my #1 need is a lefty bat with defense. And if you look at Daryl Kohler here, that's exactly what I see with him. Contact looks great. He's a lefty bat. Plate skills look incredible. His fielding also looks really good. I mean, the only thing that I'm seeing that I don't like about Daryl Kohler is the fact that he's going to be slow as buns. He plays first base. For me, if that speed comes out at the high end of that, I could see him being a third baseman. Even though he doesn't have secondary third base, I would give it to him if he gets at least Nolan Arenado speed. I think, which Nolan Arenado's speed in this game is 25. I think you're looking at a guy who's probably pro comparison I would think of would be Nolan Arenado. Arenado is a righty, but, you know, in terms of just a really, really impactful two-way third baseman, not the biggest athlete, but is a good enough fielder to kind of make up for the fact that it maybe is not the best athlete. I think Daryl Kohler, despite being, you know, a discovered prospect, is my #1 player on the board. Now, could we maybe draft William Ma at 2? Should he be there? And then try to get Daryl Kohler at 38? That's definitely a possibility, but do we want to play that game? We played that game last year. Granted, it was, you know, in round 3 and 4, but we lost. The guy that we thought, you know, he's not ranked, he could be available around later, ends up getting picked. We got lucky because Santiago Rodriguez was better than he was supposed to be, but you can't count on that. And then got a couple more guys that I think are worth first-round selection, possibly. We'll talk about Eric Guardado just a little bit. Our scouts are not fond of him. He is the third baseman here. I just think his contact hitting and his fielding are in really good spots. Not going to be a power hitter at all, but switch hitter, contact, fielding. He can bat lefty, and he has defense. That's my #1 need. My #2 need is right-hand pitching with velocity. So here in the second round, you're going to see a lot more pitching prospects, starting with Merrill Mitchie, who our scouts are very high on. I just do not see what they are seeing here. Yes, he has strikeout upside, and that stamina looks good, but stamina doesn't actually go up. I like how they updated where, like, the velocity, it doesn't project to improve because it won't, as well as the break. But they need to do that for stamina too, because stamina just doesn't go up in this game for pitchers. Similarly, Federico Rosado is a top 10 pitcher for the team in terms of the scouts. Another guy, I just don't see it. Where is the defining strength? Also doesn't have the velocity. So a couple of pitchers that my scouts really like, they just aren't showing the velocity that I'm really wanting. Another guy who our scouts think is vastly underrated is Otto Caruso. He looks to have good stamina, hits per 9, but strikeouts, control, and break. Control and break specifically, I don't want to see that as down. Michael Bautista is a center fielder who I think has the chance to be really fun. He is a lefty bat, just I don't think he's going to be quite the fielder that I'm looking for. But if he's available in the second round, doesn't look like he will be, as he is MLB ranked 23. But I would certainly be willing to take him. And then another guy who I don't think will be there, but he's actually a pitcher that I really like, is Eric Escalona. Stamina, walks per 9 look to be really high. Not going to be a great strikeout pitcher from the get-go, but I like a lot of these ratings. And then finally, a guy with some velocity on him, Luis Sandoval, right-hand pitcher. The thing with him that puts him maybe towards the bottom of our round 2 board is it looks like his starting point will be lower than a lot of people. But if you want velocity and stamina, like a couple of ratings which don't go up, this is your guy. Now, more towards round 3 and later prospects. Not going to go through everybody here, but there are a few people that I want to shout out. Jose Ortiz specifically. Look at what he's good at: stamina, velocity, break. The three things that don't go up in this game, he has at really high levels. That's really good. His walks per 9 also at a good level, which is a crucial stat for being good in simulation. Only weakness, maybe hits per 9, and potential, he could very well be a high C potential. But man, it's hard for me not to want to take this player if he's available with our 3rd round pick. A couple of position players that I like later in the draft. Howard Brown, another guy. This is just kind of the round where I feel like there's some high floor, low ceiling guys. I think in our organization, what this episode, when I went through all the players, made me realize is that there's just not a lot of just like, or sorry, there's too much just D potential. The guys that are low 60s and never going to get better. I'm fine with some C potential. Just give me some guys at the minor leagues who at least are going to be interesting come September call-ups, you know. I think Howard Brown can be one of those guys. Another guy that I probably like just a little bit more because I think he's a better fielder is Guillermo Castillo. Plays first base, much like Darryl Kohler. Honestly, kind of looks like a very similar prospect, just with lower potential. And so would love to take him with, you know, the 3rd or 4th round pick. And then that's basically it. There are more guys on the board. If you want to see everybody on the board, go ahead, take a look at the big board in the link in the description. That'll have everybody that I'm considering drafting. But those are the kind of guys on my short list. That is all I have for this episode. I guess I could just quickly go through the rest. I talked about the top 2 needs that I really want out of this draft. My 3rd need is a high floor bullpen. Those guys aren't all on my board, though. I think they'll be high on my board come draft time. I just didn't scout a lot of bullpen arms this draft cycle. I focused a lot more on starters and position players. I just feel like taking a good swing with a bullpen arm isn't so bad. I want 4 is infield. Just in general, I think we have a lot of deep potential in our infield. I'd like to spruce things up a little bit. And then 5, a defensive catcher. Didn't really scout that in this draft. Didn't find one that I loved. And so probably something that we'd have to more take a look at in the offseason. But that is all I have for this episode. Draft coming up next time. Again, you know, not your typical episode on this series, no gameplay whatsoever, but this was really helpful to me just to kind of stand back, take the 90,000 foot view of the team and see, hey, we're really strong in these particular areas, need some work here. And it made me realize that we really needed a good core lefty bat because of a lot of our core players, Boyce McDermott, and Bobby Witt probably, and Gleyber Torres being 3 of our top core players, all being righties, needed a lefty bat somewhere in there. And I think that helped me identify and maybe give Darryl Kohler the edge over William Ma in my rankings. But who do you think we should draft with the number 2 pick? William Ma, Darryl Kohler, somebody else entirely? Let me know in the comments section below. That's all I have for this episode. I'll be back soon with another, and I will see you then.